I think finding a niche that you're good at, that you want to focus on, is really the most important first step. By identifying like what segment can I serve the best, what am I passionate about.
And like you're saying too, I want to, be really clear that it doesn't exclude those other projects or other clients, but it makes it really clear when you're talking about what you do, when you're making a sales pitch, when you're creating your marketing campaigns, when you're putting stuff on social media. If you can talk to a very specific person with that specific need, they're going to be knocking down your door basically to get you in.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. I am your host, Curtis Lawson, and my guest today, Brinn Miracle, was actually a guest way back when on episode 41, which seems like an eternity ago. We had a panel discussion talking about design trends, and Brinn, I guess just to do a quick introduction, Brinn is the owner of Architangent. They're an architectural design firm here in Houston, and last time we had her, we were talking about again, architectural design, but now Brinn has a kind of a parallel focus along with architectural design that really encompasses a lot more of what she can offer to her clients and how she can assist her clients in positioning themselves, which is why we're talking today about branding. So Brinn, welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing me on again.
Yeah,
great to be here.
Always great to see you. Your primary business in the past has really just been architecture, but I like this really cool new approach that you've integrated with your brand. So architecture, interiors, and then kind of I'm guessing kind of consulting on branding. So tell us about that. Explain it to me, because I'm obviously not able to articulate it very well, but I know you can. So tell us about it.
Absolutely. So you're right. Architecture, interior design, and then you throw in branding. Like where do these things really overlap? And that's something that came to us slowly over time. What we realized is that we were invited into these conversations with a lot of clients at the very beginning of when they were forming a company. And they knew they needed a space. They knew they needed a place to operate their business. But when we were in these early discussions, a lot of that conversation was about, what are we going to do? What are we going to make? Who is our customer? What does that customer want from us as a company? Why are we doing what we're doing? And what we realized is that as more and more clients came to us, they couldn't answer a lot of those questions without some sort of guidance. And so it became this natural progression and evolution of our company to sit down with them first and say, before we start designing a space and picking finishes and all this, why are you in this business? And so fundamentally, when we talk about branding, I think there's a lot of ideas that maybe are tangential or perhaps adjacent to what branding truly is, colors, logos, and those are expressions of a brand is what we'd call that. But fundamentally, when we talk about branding, it's really who you are as a company, right? So if we think of a company as a person, who are you? Why do you do what you do? What motivates you? Who do you like to hang out with, right? What is your personality like? And if we can start to think about a brand as if it has these personality traits, we can start to then reach out to a specific consumer that we know we want to get in touch with and start to understand them better in that same process.
Yeah. So it's not just about having your space look cool for the sake of looking cool, and it's about kind of creating an experience for your customers to enter that also kind of speaks to what your company is, what your company does, and again, the experience that you want your customers to have as they enter the door, and your staff as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just for the customer. It's, I think a lot of what we've done is we've developed a proprietary process. We call it the why of design. And we've actually formed a second arm of the company called Resource Creators. And so Resource Creators is really equipping the business owners to understand very clearly and very deeply what they're doing and why they're doing it. Once they do that, they have so much more confidence. They have so much more clarity. And when you have confidence and clarity, you put this together, it really just streamlines everything you do in your business, beyond just marketing, right? Every decision you make, from hiring to, what's your next expansion type of strategy. And so really it is a fundamental business strategy type of process. And so, when we go through the why of design, the very first module is all about asking these almost like philosophical questions, right? We call it think tank therapy for your business. And it really is kind of like a therapist session where we sit down and talk about where you started and what made you want to do this, right? Because ultimately, everybody has to make money, but why did we choose this profession? Why did we choose to reach out to the specific customer? And so when we start drilling down into those why questions, right? Just why this? Why not an ice cream shop? Why not a shoe store? And fundamentally, when we get down into those types of questions, what we realize is that there's a spark in each of these clients and they say, I know why I'm doing this. And once they realize it, they are so unstoppable in their passion and their desire to fulfill that dream that they knew they had it, right? But it was probably buried under all the, logistics of the day to day. And so pulling that out of them and then saying, okay, the next step is who are the competitors and how do we position our company to be different and to appeal to that specific customer that you want to help, right? Because there's so many people out there. We want to make sure that we have a specific niche, that we are, drilling down into a specialty and saying what makes us truly different and why would someone want to engage with us and our services.
Yeah, it's a similar process that as an architect or as a builder we can also take with a consumer, right? I think people come to architects, design professionals, builders with kind of a wish list of things that they want or that they think they want in their house, but sometimes those are driven by just kind of what they see other people having and what they see on Pinterest or Instagram or whatever, and it may not necessarily work for them. And so I think by asking those why questions on the consumer, home design side, we really drill down to like, okay, why do you want that big multi-slide door? Like, you've seen it in pictures and you say you want it, but why do you want that? Or, and just asking the deeper questions, like, why are you, just to start with, why are you building this house? Right?
Yeah.
Because you can just uncover a lot of information. Oh, well, we're doing this because, my aging parents may have to live with us. So we're having more kids, and asking those kind of foundational questions helps you know which direction to go with the home that you're designing, but then drilling down into, okay, why do you want that room? So how are you going to use, more than just surface level, okay, we're going to give you a game room. All right, well, why do you want it? What are you going to do there, right?
Right. Really understanding. And I think it goes beyond the functions as well. And I think that's kind of the next layer, right? They come with you with the wish list. They say, I want all these different spaces. And then the next question, of course, is, well, why do you need it? And what are you going to do in there? And I think that's usually where most designers or builders will stop, right? They have the list, they have the criteria, but there's something even more nuanced, I think, that the types of questions where the why can take us. So when we think about, a homeowner, let's say, and they want a large kitchen and we ask why, well, I need to have all these people in there, but there's something else at the core of our being, right? Like, I want to take care of people was the way that one of my clients answered. I want to take care of people. And I like doing that through food. Well, that's going to completely change how I design that kitchen, right? It's not going to just be big with a whole bunch of room for table. Maybe I start to make it into more of a lounging kind of den type of space that's connected to that kitchen, right? And so it's going to change that nuance of how we really iterate on what that person is asking for. And so starting to ask the questions beyond just function, I think, is the key in answering a lot of those kind of deeper desires and passions that people have.
Yeah, we have a vision questionnaire that we give people, and we're asking questions like, what types of activities do you enjoy? Do you like natural light in the morning? Do you like, how do you want to feel in this space? It's not just like what tasks are you going to be doing, but like what feeling do you want this to give you?
Yeah.
And asking those deeper questions, I think, can really help drive design a lot more than just how many people and how many square feet. And
Yeah, because fundamentally we are emotional beings. And it's interesting that I don't remember the study exactly, but They had a person who had portions of their brain that were injured or damaged, and those were the portions of the brain that made emotional connections. They were unable to make a single decision without that part of their brain being active. And so when
Hmm.
we think about the choices that we make, we obviously think, oh, I'm a logical human being and I have all these ideas and reasons, but really at our core, we make decisions emotionally. And so if we can start to connect to that, I think we're going to see a lot more interesting things start to come about for both the business owners and the consumers as well.
Yeah. So kind of going back to kind of more commercial branding type conversation here. How do you how do you use a space to create your brand without it being just kind of an advertisement, basically,
Mhm.
like walking in with logos and like more like feeling salesy. How do you create more of an environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So it it has to start with the why, obviously. And then once you've answered that question and you know who your customer is, we actually design the space for the customer first and foremost. So if I know, let's say I'm designing a restaurant, and we know that they want a fast casual type of atmosphere and they want it to be fun and funky, well then I'm probably going to design the space in such a way that it's going to reflect what that customer wants, versus if we're doing fine dining, we're going to go a completely different direction. And
Hmm.
that's a really easy example, right? We're not going to have loud music blaring and the lights, maybe like disco balls and things like that in the fine dining atmosphere.
Yeah.
And likewise, we're not going to have, white tablecloths and, the waiters with the wearing their tuxedos. Those are kind of silly examples, but
Sure.
when we think about branding, it's really about the sum of the parts, right? It's not any one specific thing. It's all of those things together, and the emotional connection that we can create through spatial solutions. So that could be anything from the way we design a built-in element where it creates a kind of a secondary space. Maybe it's something we do with the ceilings to help lower it down and give it a different sense of scale. Maybe that's something where we go more for the senses of there's a certain smell or sounds. I think obviously if we're doing like a wellness retreat, maybe that's much more, softer textures, different lighting. And so all of these things together create what that brand is going to communicate, right, about the company to that particular client. So if we take that wellness example, if I go in there and I see, you know, um, harsh lighting and uncomfortable chairs and everything is white, I'm going to feel a little uncomfortable. But if I go in there and maybe it feels more like a spa at a hotel, I'm going to feel really relaxed. And those feelings, those emotional connections is really what I'm going to remember about my experience there. And that's what's going to make me say, you know what, I want to go back, or, and that felt a little weird to me, even if it's
Hmm.
subconscious. We may not say those things out loud, but realizing that design has that subconscious impact is the most powerful thing. Logos are very much secondary. Logos, I feel like, really shouldn't be in the space unless it's a fun, funky type of,
Subtle,
yeah,
introduction.
and really the logos should be resolved or reserved rather. They should, the logo should be reserved for a place where it's really at, the front desk or something. So you know where you are. It's more of a wayfinding tool in
Hmm.
that manner. There can be ways to take a logo and break it out more subtly, make it into a pattern. Maybe we take that logo design and we come up with some different graphics and things like that that can be rolled out. So it's more of a again, that subconscious type of rollout, but it's not going to be logo plastered on a wall.
If you found value in this episode of Your Project Shepherd podcast, please consider leaving us a review and sharing it with your friends. That helps us expand our reach and bring this content to more people. Thanks for being here. I think most of our audience are home builders, remodelers, architects, interior designers, that sort of people in kind of in our space. How can our type of business use the same strategy? We're not a restaurant. We're not, we don't have people coming in to buy
Hmm.
a good, basically, or a physical good where they're going to walk out with it, right? So, but we are more creating a space for collaboration and design, and most of us is just a meeting space for
Hmm.
for our clients, right? So what are some strategies that that people in our area can use
Hmm.
in that regard?
Yeah. And I would say to answer that question, I would say it's not a spatial solution for, and I'll speak from the architect's perspective, right? So for most architects, it is extremely difficult for them to articulate what makes them different.
Hmm.
And that is the key to what your space looks and feels like, right? And who your customer is, and if they're going to be attracted to what you have to offer. And so I actually do a lecture for my alma mater each semester, and it talks a lot. Put up the three pictures of these architects, and they all kind of look the same. And you go to each one and you say, "Oh, hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I do drawings and I do buildings, and I'm really good at my job." Go to the next one. "What do you do?" "I do drawings, I do buildings, and I'm really good." Right? And we go down this list, and everybody looks and feels the same. And so when an architect or builder can say, "I help a specific group of people to accomplish a specific goal, and here's how I do it that's different," that starts to open this idea in the mind of that consumer to say, "Ooh, this is a little bit different.
Hmm.
Tell me more." Right? It opens that idea of curiosity.
Hmm.
And so as an example, so Architangent, we have fallen into the niche of helping small to medium business owners. We help them create or recreate a brand and then translate it into a physical space for a lot of the hospitality types of businesses.
Hmm.
So that right there, we can say small and medium sized business. Who am I helping? I want people to self select out, right? And so that's going to help them decide, oh, well, that's me, or that's not really a fit.
Hmm.
And then, we say we help them with a brand. Do I have a branding problem? Well, maybe they can help me. Spatial, we help them translate the brand into spatial solutions, into tangible physical spaces. Well, I'm going to be building a building. Well, let's talk to them, right? And so each time we talk about it and we add a little layer of nuance or a little piece of information, then these customers are able to say, "I think you're exactly what I need." And that is so much more important than what the space looks like. Yes, it's
Hmm.
important, but not as important as making sure you're getting the right customer in the door and that they've already pre-selected themselves to say, "I think you might be a good fit for me."
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I think a lot of design professionals and builders fall into the trap of trying to do everything and be everything to
Hmm.
everybody. I mean, that's absolutely something that I've done in the past, or that
Same. Yeah.
I'm trying to steer my way out of. I would say we still do probably too large of a spectrum of projects, but I think although we do have a focus of what we want to be and where we want to be, so we're in the process of kind of focusing on that. And if we
Hmm.
if we still get some of the other stuff trickling in, that's cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
this is kind of where we want to go with it. So I think finding a niche that you're good at, that you want to focus on, is really the most important first step. By identifying like what segment can I serve the best,
Hmm.
what am I passionate about.
Absolutely.
It,
And like you're saying too, I want to, be really clear that it doesn't exclude those other projects or other clients, but it makes it really clear when you're talking about what you do, when you're making a sales pitch, when you're creating your marketing campaigns, when you're putting stuff on social media. If you can talk to a very specific person with that specific need, they're going to be knocking down your door
yeah.
basically to get you. And then those other ones will also come in adjacent. So, as an example, we primarily do, this work with businesses, but we still get people who reach out and say, "Hey, I love what you do. Would you be interested in working on my house? Would you
Yeah.
be interested in doing these other types of projects and in, industrial or this or that?" And we say, "Absolutely." But our bread and butter is, that niche where we say, "This is what we're most passionate about. This is what we're best at." And that's who we're going to try to attract to us.
Yeah, it's funny when so we rebranded from Curtis Lawson Homes to Crafted Custom Homes in 2018, and my original motivation was just I want my name off the
Hmm.
sign because I don't want people calling me at 10 o'clock at night just because my name's on the sign. I want you calling your project manager, not
Right.
not me,
Good
because
foresight. I like that. Yeah.
we have a large team, and so I don't want to be you know if the name's on the sign, that's who you call. So anyway, so I was trying to think of a new company name. I'm like, oh, Crafted sounds like a good name. It represents craftsmanship and handmade and all that kind of stuff. So I said, okay, I like that. Let's go with that. I never really thought about using that to more drill down on the niche that I wanted to focus on, really until the last couple of years. And then I was like, okay, how can we make crafted represent, again, that kind of, really focusing on customers who want kind of custom handmade details that are, meticulously crafted for them, and not a generic run of the mill spec house
Hmm.
basic off the shelf stuff. Like, how do we express that we are going to, create something that other people maybe either can't or don't want us to take the time to create or whatever, right? And so that thinking kind of entered my head in the last couple of years, and that's the direction that I want to go with it, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think it's just an example of how you can identify a niche. In my case, I did the name first and then came up with a niche.
Yeah.
But if you have the niche, maybe you rebrand your company name to represent
Hmm.
what it is
Hmm.
that you want to be. So instead of Brinn Miracle Architecture,
Right.
we're Architangent, right? And
Yes.
so come up with a name possibly, that represents where you want to be.
And that's actually something that we help our clients with. We've had several clients who come in and they have multiple brands. Maybe they don't even know that they're multiple brands, but as an example, we have a dermatologist that we work with, and she'd come to us initially to say, "Hey, I need a clinic space," and then she started telling us about her client base. She has a very big social media following, and so she was like you, Curtis, known as Doctor So and So.
Hmm.
And how do you make a clinic that you want other physicians to be at when it's named after you? They're going to expect to see you,
Yeah.
right? And so we helped her through that process to say, here are the different ways we can separate and join you, the person, and the celebrity personality to this clinic. And so through that, we ended up calling it skin inclusive. And so she is able to then separate herself as needed from the business as she
Mhm.
grows. Maybe she wants to sell the practice
I was just
eventually.
about to say that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
and so having this high level strategy is hugely important, especially if you do have ambitions of growing your company or doing more than one thing.
Yeah.
And so we do help a lot with the naming, the strategy portions, obviously the org charts of how all these little pieces start to interact. It's like a big puzzle, really.
Yeah. It's really hard to sell Dr. Smith skincare. It's hard to sell Curtis Lawson Homes or Brinn Miracle Architecture. But one day, 20 years from now, if you want to exit the business and or hand it off to your family
Hmm.
or sell it, whatever, it's a lot easier to sell something that's branded versus completely tied to one person, one name.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is, the other thing to think about is brand equity. And that term gets thrown around a lot. And so what we mean when we say brand equity, it's basically the value, the way that a customer thinks about your company, right? When we think about Nike, we think, oh, okay, that's for athletes, and it's this kind of edgy, kind of cool brand, and it's global. It has a lot of weight because when I see a Nike shirt versus just a plain white T-shirt, I'm probably going to go for the Nike because it has a value attached to that logo, to that name, right?
Hmm.
They've built that up. That's their reputation. A brand is your reputation, and so if you're able to then start to create an entity that has a reputation that is good and that people know about and tell their friends about, that's the equity, right? And when other people are then advertising for you, that's valuable. And so, like you're saying, when we start to detach it from a specific person, I think that gives it a lot more equity, or at least potential to build that equity.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on storytelling a little bit. I'm a big believer in using stories in your marketing and how you, in your sales process. I think storytelling is very powerful. Um, and when I had, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, I had Lauren Jefferson from Focus Copy as my guest, and she's a good friend of mine. She works with us, kind of fine tuning our messaging and our copywriting on our website, our marketing materials. Um, so we talked about using storytelling to build trust with customers. Um, what are your thoughts on how you can tell a story and build trust through the physical spaces?
Absolutely. And that one it's a good question and it's very tricky. And this is where the expertise comes in, right? So when we think about storytelling for a company, consumers today are a lot more guarded and shielded, right? We've been completely bombarded by marketing and we don't want to feel like we're being sold to. And so what we've been seeing most recently is that people want something that's more individualized, something that is more tangible. And what I mean by that is they don't want just a company, they want a person, right? That's who we do business with. That's who we make relationships with. And they want to feel like they have a relationship, even if it is a company, that there's a person on the other side of that. And it's not just, big corporate money machine. And so when we think about that type of relationship and how you build it, there's so many layers. Storytelling is absolutely one of the best ways, one of those layers that we can start to put into the narrative of why we made the company, who it's for. And really when we start to tell a founder's narrative, right? Like, here's Curtis and here's why he started Crafted Custom Homes. This is why it was so important to him. For me why did I go into helping businesses with brand and strategy and all these things? Well, I saw this struggle and I knew that I had struggled in those spaces, right? I went out there and just said, Architangent, we're gonna do architecture. And then, the years wasted of trial and error and all these things. And I want help. I want to help people shortcut that. And I want to see them succeed, right? Because my personal ambition is that I am an enabler and I want to help as many people as possible. And that it brings me so much joy. Like, I even have goosebumps just saying it. I'm like, I want to see people reach their dreams, right? It's like when you see your kid do something amazing for the first time, you're just like, yes, you did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the kind of thing that I want to help with. And so if I can extract this founder's narrative of what makes them special, what makes their company special, then we can start to tell that through the messaging. Now, that's just one component, right? And now you're talking about the physical space. Those physical spaces can be part of that story as the setting, right? So if we have a space that feels maybe similar to what that founder experienced, maybe it's like a country setting because that's where they grew up and that's central to their business. These are kind of vague examples because I would need something more
Sure.
specific to work on, but we can tie it back to the founder or we can tie it back to what that customer really wants, right? And that's the other powerful part is, where does the customer see themselves in that narrative, in that story? And that's usually where you're going to invite them in and they're not going to leave. Once they see themselves as part of your narrative, that's really when they become a brand ambassador.
Yeah, it's funny. We were in Italy back at the end of May for our anniversary, and I don't know why we decided to do this because I am totally not a fashion person in any way, but we went to the Ferragamo
Oh, nice.
Museum.
Yeah.
I don't know
I haven't been, but
if
I've
you.
seen some pictures.
So I'm again. I've never. I couldn't identify a Ferragamo anything. I don't know anything about fashion, right? Obviously. Um, but so we did this Ferragamo museum, and it was so. We paid like $30 to go into the museum, but their store was attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you go through the museum, and it's like you want to go straight in the store and buy a pair of shoes,
Mm-hmm.
because you get this connection from going through. It talks about um, you know Mr. Ferragamo and his journey from Italian immigrant to moving to New York and then moving to LA, and how he developed his business and created these handcrafted shoes. And it went into his personal struggles, and then it taught how he built his brand. And here's all the people that the famous people that he interacted with, and it just like drew you into their story.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they had the displays set up and the way you went through the museum, it's like you came out wanting to go spend $1,000 on a pair of shoes.
Well, it's
It was so
interesting.
cool.
Yeah, but when you're saying you go through and they tell these little bits and stories, right? And this could be an assumption, but you're probably latching on to the commonalities you have with that founder,
Hmm.
right? He was an immigrant and he struggled, but then he succeeded and then he made these things, right? So you as a crafts person, seeing someone who maybe started small and then rose and grew, you're like, oh yeah, I could be that, or I did that, or I want to be that. And so when we have these different kind of breadcrumbs along the way, that's the thing that's making you make those purchasing decisions, right? You go
Yeah.
in there, and you're like, I want to spend $1,000. Where's my shoes? Which is why it's so powerful.
No, I didn't. I did not come out with $1,000 pair of shoes. I just want to clarify that. It's like we're already spending way too much money on this trip. No
Right.
shoes.
No shoes.
So how do you, you know, they had all these shoes on display. They had all these photos and all the, video or films, like all this history about the company, right? We as builders and architects, we have a lot of photos and history of what we've done. I mean, down in my conference room, I've got 200 photos on the wall of the projects that we've done, but they're just kind of, just photos randomly scattered all over the place. How can we, as design and construction professionals, how can we take this often huge library of material that we have, or if you're a design professional, you've got tons of drawings going back from as long as you've been in business, sheets of paper with designs on them. How can you take all that history of pictures and drawings and sketches? How can you take that and turn that into a compelling marketing narrative for your company?
Great question. What I have noticed is that people like to see behind the scenes. When Instagram first started, it was all about the pretty pictures, right? Most of social media has always been about the best version and the final version. But what people really want is authenticity, and that's another word that gets thrown around. But they don't want to feel like they're being sold to. And so part of that is to show things that happened before, right? The before, the after. They want to see that there's that truth to what we're saying, that we're not just making it up. We're not just saying it to get $1. And so if we can start showing behind the scenes, the bloopers, right? The kind of director's cut where where there's all this other stuff on the sides, if we start making a story around that, the process, right? The journey, because that is the story. Great book I read, Journey Before Destination, is one of the quotes in there. And so when we think about the journey before the destination, that's where people get engaged. Like anybody can have a pretty picture. And this is usually what I tell architects when they show the portfolio. It's like, yeah, like people aren't going to come to you and say, oh, are you sure you're qualified to do this? Like you're already qualified. You have the pretty pictures, you have the experience, the degree, the whatever years of experience. And so that narrative, that storytelling is really the opportunity to differentiate yourself. So if we were to take all of that historic information, maybe that is, compiled into not necessarily like a slideshow, but some sort of video moment where people can either watch it on social before they come to you, or maybe in the office and it's playing like a reel, almost like a documentary, of like, who are you as a firm and what have you done? And, maybe there's just a bunch of interviews with past clients, and after they've lived in their space for a year, whether that's a commercial space or a residential space, what has life been like? Those are the stories that are really interesting of, we were really skeptical about, adding this room, and then we did, and now we love it. And it's our favorite space. Just those interesting stories. Those are the types of things that we sit around the table and talk about during meals and, family gatherings and that type of thing.
It goes back to the storytelling aspect of it. Yeah. So how do you, how does any company, dig deep to really clarify what is their unique value, their brand advantage? Like what questions should you ask yourself to dig out those little nuggets that are going to be what how do you get to that message that you want to have?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm asking you to reveal part of your top secret process here.
Yeah, it is definitely a key component of our process. And we do have a ton of questions that they have to go through, and there's whiteboarding, and, you pull in all these different things. But I would say one of the questions that a lot of people kind of go, with is, would you still do what you're doing if you didn't make money? And that's a hard one, because people are like, well, I got to make money. I'm like, yeah, but would you do this? Because if it were all about money, we'd all go to Wall Street and be investment bankers and, make millions and billions or whatever else. But we chose this profession? And so would we still do this, right? And that question typically leads you to thinking about, what is the impact that I want to make? What is the legacy that I want to leave? And who am I really leaving it for? Is it about me and what I want people to think about me, or is it about the people that I'm serving and trying to help? And then what are the challenges or the problems that that person has that I'm trying to solve with my unique skill set, right? So why architecture? For me, I really truly believe that good design can change the world, because when we look at something like, excuse me, like the iPhone, take the iPhone for an example. It's a piece of technology, but it's very well designed. Pre
Mhm.
iPhone, if anybody remembers those days with the little flip phones and the tiny little buttons, and you can't, the screens are terrible, everything's terrible.
Or the BlackBerry, even where you have a full
Yeah.
keyboard and you're trying to sit
Yeah,
there and do
do.
this. And yeah.
Exactly. But you think about that and that experience, and it was fine. It got the job done, right? It was those functional questions. Well, I needed to send an email or to send a text message. Apple thought about it in a completely different way of, what is this intuitive experience that we can provide that gives you this idea of what could be. And so when you look at this idea of the possibilities, I think that's going to be really powerful of, what do I want to provide for my customer and for this person that I'm trying to serve? What kind of end game do I want? And so for me, when I think about architecture, if each person in this world could experience the most amazing space and live their life within that, how much more creative would they be? How much more calm would they be? Would they find more rest and relaxation because they're in an environment that is supporting them as a human being? Would they find better relationships because of architecture and design? Would our world would be more beautiful, obviously, but what else would do that, right? And so when I go down these questions of why architecture, those are some of the reasons, and those are some of the questions that I lead people through.
Mm. Why don't more people do this? Right. So like what are like, if why don't more company owners go through this process? Like what barriers
Mm,
are there that prevent people from going down that road?
mhm.
Are people, they think it's not important? Are they scared how much it's going to cost? They don't see the benefit. Like what are your
Yes,
thoughts?
yes, and yes. Yeah. Those are some of the reasons. I think at the beginning, most small business owners decide they don't want to work for someone else, and they'll start a company and just go out, hang the shingle, and start getting work, right? It's not at the beginning of that thought process. Their thought process is, get some clients, get some money. And then as things start to grow, then those little questions and the friction starts to come up of, well, why can't I get more clients? Or I'm not getting the ones that I want, or gosh, this is harder than I thought. And so once we start to experience that friction is really when those questions start to pop up of, what do I need that's going to help me? And when most people think of branding, they think of logos and colors. They don't think about the brand strategy. And a lot of people don't know that brand strategy exists. Or like you're saying, maybe they're afraid, like, oh gosh, there's going to be so much money, or it's only reserved for the big companies. And the research that we've done, there are studies that show the average consumer expects every business, small businesses included, to have a larger purpose for why they're doing what they're doing. And that's why consumers will be drawn to one company over another, is if they align with their value system.
Mhm.
And so if business owners haven't figured out what their value system is, it's going to be really hard to connect with that customer. Um, it's interesting too when we talk about price points. A lot of people say, well, what's the dollar amount? And then they say, oh, well, that's too much. And we say, well, in what context? Is it too much, or are you going to see returns? And so we've actually been measuring this with a lot of our clients. We had a salon client go through this process, and they have 50% increase in revenue. And then we had um, a commercial landlord who has tenants in their 4 buildings. They got to increase their rents by 35% after they went through the process.
Mm.
So there are tangible, measurable outcomes of consistent, clear branding. And so, when we think about that, it's kind of like, what's the cost of not doing this?
Mhm.
There's definitely that opportunity cost. But that is one of the things that I wanted to address. As we created this system and this process, we have it in basically a 3 tiers. I know not everybody has the same dollars in the bank. And so we have like a do-it-yourself option, that's like the $2,000 option. And then we have a kind of a done with you where it's more of an online community and you do a lot of the work and then bring it back and get some feedback. That's, around the 10 grand mark. And then we have a complete, like we'll do the entire thing for you for 20. And so there's multiple price points too. And I think that's, the key there is that once you get that clarity, that $2,000, that 10 grand, that's a drop in the bucket. Once you're able to, meet the right customers and they bring in $100,000 project to you or more. I mean, my goodness, I wish I'd done it sooner.
Yeah. Well, and also the benefits for it, and we touched on this briefly, but kind of the benefits for your staff, your employees. Um, and I'm saying this working in an old building that needs a lot of work and needs a big facelift here. So, which is something I'll talk to you about after we finish recording. But how do you? I mean, how important is it to create a sense of not just well-being, but a sense of this is a safe, comfortable, warm, welcoming place to work every day. And how important is that, as well as the customer
Absolutely.
experience?
And I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually a huge part of, brand and how we communicate it, not just to, the outside, like you're saying, the customers, but to our internal team, because they're the backbone of how we're able to do what we do. What we found is that when clients go through this, they have higher retention of existing employees. They are able to attract the talent that they most want. Those employees are happier. They are healthier. They are then the ambassador, right? They feel as if they are seen and heard and understood. And then that gives them a sense of ownership, right? When we feel that we are included and accepted, that makes us want to engage, right? The engaged employee versus the disengaged employee. And I actually spent probably 5 or 6 years of my career doing workplace design specifically. And so that was always a big part of it, was the research on, the impact of space on employees and, all the productivity. Because these were Fortune 100 companies who are like, we have all the data and we want to make sure that people are very productive. But beyond even productivity, it gives them a sense of belonging. And I think that's huge for building a culture, right? Because a business is really the culture of the place.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get started on doing kind of a brand clarity session or working with you guys, what does that look like? How does somebody get started in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, we just launched Resource Creators. In the past, we'd always done just a workshop format where, one-on-one clients. And since I want to help as many people as possible, we've gone to an online format. And so like I said, we have the DIY version where it's just a one-time fee and you get all the materials. It's a curriculum. You go through it at your pace. You do the exercises and the activities and you're good to go. When it comes to kind of the hybrid, it is typically an 8-week structured program. And you go in each week, you do a new activity, you upload it, and then we give feedback back and forth, and we have regular calls in a group format. And then, of course, if you want to work with us in a more intimate capacity, then we can do the one-on-one style where we really sit down just like this and we dig out, we act as the therapist. We'll put you on the couch if you want and, ask you all the questions, dig it out. And we do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of, competition research, positioning strategies, looking at a lot of the differentiation and a lot of the things that go on behind the scenes in terms of trends worldwide, even outside of your industry. And we can even go so far as to, design the logo itself, pick all the, the brand expression and everything like that.
And those services, just to be clear, those services are separate from architectural services,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So if I wanted to hire you to redesign the office, right, and do the rebranding, those are kind of two separate components,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So if we know, up front that you want to do the brand portion and the space, then we'll obviously start with the brand. But
Sure.
we've had clients do, both and either or, and so we're able to help in those capacities.
So it's probably better to start with the brand and how do you want this to feel, right?
Yeah.
And then do the space, because the first is going to speak to the second. Right?
Exactly. And yeah, we found that when clients start with the brand, then they're able to make decisions faster. They're so much more confident. They don't second guess. I mean, it makes our life a lot easier because otherwise we'll say, well, what about this? No, I don't know. Scratch the head and
Yeah.
spin the wheels a little bit more.
Because you don't want to do the space first and then try to force the brand on the space that's already
Exactly.
there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Brinn, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
Always great to see you. And yeah, we'll be sure and link Architangent and resource creators on our show notes and everything on YouTube and Spotify. But thank you so much for joining us again. I thought it was a great conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me again.
And be sure and check out Brinn's podcast, Beyond the Blueprint with Brinn Miracle. It's also on Spotify and I would assume YouTube and all the things.
All the places, I'm sure.
So cool. So check her out too. And thank you for joining us today on the Your Project Shepherd podcast. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.